Hello, good evening and welcome to this special broadcast as Ghana prepares to dissolve its 8th parliament and usher in the 9th. Tonight we'll explore the legacy of the outgoing parliament, the controversies that defined it and the expectations from the incoming legislators. I am Benga Aborowa.
And I am Felicity Ezewike. Over the next 2 hours, we will also hear from our esteemed guests who will help us analyze the key policies and political dynamics of the 8th Parliament and what lies ahead. My colleagues as well will be joining us. Before we delve in, I want to specially welcome Benga Aborowa to the re-emergence on New Centra's airwaves.
It's been a long time.
Yes,
a gap year, and I'm back. It's good
Welcome
to be
back
yeah,
on air. So, a lot has happened prior to this inauguration that we are expected. Tomorrow is 7th. The inauguration of the president is expected. But before that, the parliament will get inaugurated. The 9th parliament, that's 2 hours. We're 1 hour ahead of Ghana. So in the next 2 hours, we will be bringing you live feeds of that inauguration ceremony. That's the parliament now. Small activities. You can see people just moving around and getting ready.
And it's quite interesting that, you know, Ghana does this at midnight, at exactly midnight. In other countries, you wait for the start of the business of the day around 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock before you do this. But I find this really interesting. And like you mentioned earlier, the proper inauguration of the president, the presidential inauguration would happen later during the day of the 7th. Nigeria's president, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, arrived in Ghana this evening, and they're expecting a number of heads of state and representatives of government from everywhere.
Yes, should be there. And this is quite a historic situation for the presidency, really. We know our focus is on the parliament, but it's fair to let our viewers know that it's special in Ghana this time around because the president that's been inaugurated was a former president. And then we are having the first female vice president for Ghana inaugurated tomorrow. Interesting developments in Accra.
Ghana has always been a beacon of democracy and stability in West Africa. It wasn't always like that. Remember the 70s, they used to call West Africa the Wild Wild West, the cool belt of Africa. There used to be coups here and there, and they've been able to stabilize and, you know, have a democratic change of government over time. And people look at Ghana as a model for democracy in Africa, so kudos to them.
Kudos to them. So we have a couple of things we'll be doing in the next 2 hours, and one of them is to assess the 8th Assembly, what they were able to accomplish, and maybe some pending business that might spill over to the 9th Assembly. That will be in the first hour. In the second hour, we'll be taking a look at expectations for the 9th Assembly. For now, let's take a look at one of those issues that played a huge part in the 8th Assembly, and that's the LGBTQ rights bill. That was a lot of controversy. Ghana's Supreme Court has paved the way for a contested bill severely curtailing LGBTQ rights to become law after rejecting 2 bids to overturn it. Lawmakers approved the Sexual Rights and Family Values Bill in February, drawing international condemnation despite gaining wide public support in the conservative West African country. For News Central, international correspondent Afua Hagan has this for us.
Ghana's Supreme Court has paved the way for a contested bill severely curtailing LGBTQ rights to become law after rejecting 2 bids to overturn it. Lawmakers approved the Sexual Rights and Family Values Bill in February, drawing international condemnation despite gaining wide public support in the conservative West African country. The proposed anti-LGBTQ legislation is considered amongst the most stringent in Africa, stipulating jail terms of up to 3 years for engaging in same-sex relations and up to 5 years for promoting or sponsoring LGBTQ activities. Gay sex is already illegal in the religious, mostly Christian nation, but while discrimination against LGBTQ people is common, no one has ever been prosecuted under the colonial era law. At this protest in London, LGBTQ rights campaigners voiced fear and disappointment.
We want President Nana Akufo-Addo not to sign, to reject it, because we are all members of that country, Ghana. I'm from Ghana. So I don't see reason why you will sign a bill against me. What reason? What am I done?
The most painful aspect is Ghana is supposed to be the gateway to Africa, the most democratic nation in Africa, on the continent. How can we stoop this low? You know, they're trying to tarnish all our image.
The bill has sparked criticism from the United Nations and several countries, including the United States, as well as concern from Ghana's finance ministry, which warned of a risk of losing billions of dollars in World Bank funding. Ghana fears it could face the same fate as Uganda, which last year passed one of the harshest anti-gay laws in the world. The World Bank froze lending to Uganda in the wake of the law, which imposes penalties of up to life in prison for consensual same-sex relations and contains provisions that make aggravated homosexuality an offence punishable by death. For News Central, I'm Afua Hagan.
Right, that was a report specially put together, taking a look at the LGBTQ bill that was quite controversial at the time. We're joined now by Afua Hagan, who put together that report. Afua, good evening.
Good evening to you.
Now, Afua, the anti-LGBTQ bill remains a deeply divisive issue. What does its widespread support in Parliament indicate about the intersection of politics, culture, and human rights in Ghana? And we do remember that this bill was passed to law under the presidency of the outgoing president, Nana Akufo-Addo, who has not signed it into law. Do you think the incoming president, looking at how controversial and dicey this bill is, will he assent to it? Would he put a signature to it so he can make it a law?
Well, this anti-gay bill, as it's being called, I mean, I think its full title is a proper sexual human rights and family planning bill, something like that. And this bill was all about basically what people do behind closed doors. And really, the scrutiny came to the LGBTQ plus community. The bill isn't just about that. It's about, you know, what sexual aids people can use at home, things like that. But is really the core of it is about LGBTQ plus rights, relationships that they can and cannot have, and the prosecution of them. Now, you're absolutely right in saying that there is quite widespread support for this bill in Parliament. This is something that they've been trying to get ratified since 2021. And you're absolutely right in saying the outgoing president, Nana Akufo-Addo, did not ratify this bill into law, didn't sign it into law. And I think this was very deliberate, that he didn't necessarily want it to be part of his legacy. He kicked it into the long grass. And now it comes to President-elect John Mahama. Now, during his campaign period, he did express support for the bill. So I think we can expect it to be ratified by the current president, or by the president that's going to be inaugurated in, you know, the coming 12 hours. You're absolutely right in saying this is a real intersection of culture, of religion in this country. Now, a lot of people in Ghana, you know, I've spoken to people about this, activists here in London. I went to a few protests here in London outside the Ghanaian embassy, and also people on the ground in Accra and Kumasi that I've spoken to. Although people are saying, yes, we do have support for this bill, there is a growing voice of people who are saying, look, you know, what people do behind closed doors should be their business. And if this bill starts with this, which, like I said, is not just about homosexual relationships, it's also what people do in heterosexual relationships behind closed doors. If we have some laws about that, where's the next law? What's the next law going to be? What else is the government going to be looking over our shoulder at? What else can we be prosecuted for? And a lot of people are saying that this is the beginning of a slippery slope.
There are concerns as well about the Parliament's international standing among their peers, considering, the international stance on LGBTQ rights. How is that impacting relationships with allies and organizations so far? What are analysts saying?
And Felicity, that is such a good point. Look, so much of Nana Akufo-Addo's presidency and the success he feels he had was about Ghana's place on the international stage. He was a very outward-looking president. It was about making Ghana, an African superpower, a peaceful country, the gateway to Africa. Look at the success of, the return, the year of the return, and beyond the return, of getting people to come to Ghana, to enjoy themselves, to invest, like I said, seeing it as the gateway to Africa. But also, Ghana is a place to do business. And also, Ghana is a place that, got money from the International Monetary Fund to the tune of $3 billion. And so on the international stage, Ghana wants to look tolerant. It wants to look forward-thinking. It wants to look liberal where it can, because it wants to be attractive on the world stage. And this bill is the complete opposite of that. So what happened in Uganda, where you had the World Bank and the IMF stepping away from the country, freezing loans? Ghana cannot afford for that to happen. Look, the economy was such a huge issue in this election. And the economy, yes, is getting better. Inflation is not as high as it was, say, in this time in 2022. But it's still, the country is still so much more expensive than it has been. The dollar against the cedi, the pound against the cedi is so much weaker. Ghana is going to rely on the IMF and the World Bank in its resurgence, in its coming back to, what it would deem as its former glory. And its place on the international stage is paramount. And so this bill could really be damaging to Ghana, damaging to its reputation on the world stage, damaging to its reputation as a hotspot for tourism, and damaging as a place that will do business with other countries. You have the United Nations and the United States expressing their concerns over this bill, and of course, no other country has the right to wade in and say, you should have this bill and you should have that bill. At all. But Ghana has to think about where it is on the international stage and how this bill could be damaging to its future prospects.
Now, interesting analysis, Afua. You've put it quite well, looking at Ghana's relations with the rest of the world. I mean, no country is an island, and we need to see beyond local politics. This will be an interesting balancing act for the incoming president to, look at the local politics and also Ghana's relations with the rest of the world. You did talk about IMF conditionalities and World Bank loans with regards to the Ugandan situation, which might likely happen if the new president, when he's sworn in tomorrow, signs to this law. So how concerning, we've looked at it from the external window. Looking at Ghana internally, local politics, how much of a concern is it, and how much of a balancing act does the incoming president, President John Mahama, when he's sworn in, will have to do, looking at how conservative Ghana is and also the religious setup? And the incoming president has also expressed in a few interviews in the past and commentary his support for the bill, even though he's tried to be very diplomatic, but we do know where he stands.
John Mahama has a very thin, tight rope to walk, a very a thin line to cross at this point. It's going to be very difficult for him because, yes, he has expressed his views on this bill. He's expressed his support from it in the past. But he also needs to come into this presidency still as an outward-looking president. He doesn't want to be too much like his predecessor, Nana Akufo-Addo, who got some criticism for being such an outward-looking president. For someone in the diaspora, someone like myself, a lot of what President Nana Akufo-Addo achieved was beneficial to me as a Ghanaian living outside of Ghana. But if you're a Ghanaian living in Accra, in East Legon, in Hatcho, wherever, it wasn't necessarily beneficial at all. So John Dramani has this real balancing act of making sure that Ghana still has this place on the international stage, has this reputation of being a safe and tolerant country, but also bowing to the will of the people. And if there is a lot of support for this bill, which there is inside and outside Parliament, he has to honour that. He absolutely has to honour that. But if he honours that to the expense of an IMF loan or a World Bank loan, that it is someone in North Legon, in Hatcho, in Efajasi, who's going to feel those effects, because economically it will be much more difficult for that person. It could mean higher prices. It could mean not being able to get as much foodstuffs as before. It could mean worse farming outcomes, because the IMF and the World Bank loans may have stopped if this bill has ratified. But drilling that down to the ordinary Ghanaian is quite difficult, because a lot of people seem to think, look, we can manage without an IMF loan. We can manage without a World Bank loan. And we want to see Ghana beyond aid. You know, we'll remember that famous speech that Nana Akufo-Addo gave when he was with the French President Macron, and he was, all about Ghana beyond aid, Africa beyond aid. We want to be doing trade, doing business, doing it legitimately, and not just accepting handouts. However, in a post-COVID period where the economy was doing pretty badly, not just in Ghana but all over the world, and an IMF loan was needed, it had to be taken, and it had to be taken to aid recovery. We may be in that point again. And if the IMF and the World Bank have walked away from Ghana because of this bill, then it will make things increasingly difficult for the ordinary Ghanaian. And that's something that John Mahama, going into this presidency, is going to have to balance very, very carefully. Like I said, he has a really thin tightrope that he has to walk, and he has to get it absolutely right, because Ghanaians are so hungry for change.
Indeed. Change is what everybody always talk about when we have this transition from one administration to the other. Afua, stay with us, but let's take this special report, another special report. We're still looking at assessing the 8th Assembly that has, been dissolved. We are awaiting the inauguration of the 9th Assembly. President Nana Akufo-Addo's electronic transaction levy, known as the E-Levy initiative, has been defined as the assurance to sustainable investment in entrepreneurship, youth employment, cybersecurity, digital security, and road infrastructure. Yet, majority of Ghanaians are against the idea of its implementation, although it's been 3 years, almost 3 years actually, since the introduction of the E-Levy initiative. The government has refused to reduce it despite complaints from the citizens. My colleague Omolola Ololade put together this report on the subject. We'll be right back after.
Across Africa, it is becoming increasingly evident that the taxation of mobile money and digital transactions is here to stay. In many countries across the continent, the implementation of such taxes has been tumultuous, often characterized by a cycle of introduction, suspension, redesign, and reintroduction. Ghana is no exception, as the country has taken a leading role in expanding the tax base to generate additional revenue for entrepreneurship, youth employment, and digital and road infrastructure. Introduced in May 2022, the 1.5% tax on electronic transfers, including mobile money payment over 100 Ghana cedis, sparked significant discontent among the population and mobile money operators. Despite the E-Levy being the second most important direct tax introduced since the COVID-19 pandemic, there have been serious concerns about the amount of revenue collected. With projected revenue more than 5 times greater than the actual revenue, the discrepancy between the two was notably high in the first 7 months after the E-Levy's introduction in May 2022. While many have expressed concerns about the ability to meet the targeted revenue due to pressures on businesses and the economy as a whole, the Deputy Finance Minister remains optimistic, saying they have considered potential challenges and devised solutions.
If anybody tells you that we are not going to get that figure, tell him it's not true. We believe in what we have done. It is a very, very conservative figure. And even we know that once you introduce a tax, there will be attrition rate. People will initially resist and try to avoid it and all that. Even that has been factored. I'm only saying that in our revenue projections, we did attrition rate with that figure so that in case we want to hit a certain amount that we expect to get.
Although the government has refused to reduce the E-Levy rate despite public protests, the country has seen a positive impact on transactions, albeit with regional disparities, according to experts. The Electronic Transactions Levy, which came into effect in May 2022, may have become one of the most unpopular tax measures in Ghana's history, but it has proven effective in generating revenue and contributing to the improvement of Ghana's economy. In Lagos for News Central, I am Omolola Ololade.
Now, we just heard that report from News Central's Omolola Ololade talking about the Electronic Transaction Levy, one of the key moments of the outgoing 8th Assembly of the Ghanaian Parliament. The Electronic Levy tax basically says a 1.5% tax on electronic transactions above 100 Ghana cedis. And joining us for this discussion is Bernard Akede. Bernard Akede was in Ghana for the elections in December. Warm welcome to you, Bernard, and thanks for joining us on this special broadcast.
Thanks for having me, Felicity. Thanks for having me, Benga. And I'll return the greetings. Warm welcome to you too, Benga.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. I mean,
welcoming him back.
it's very similar to Mahama's comeback, you know.
Yes.
Yeah,
that's a fair comparison.
Yeah, he was in Jubilee House. He left, and then he's back to Jubilee House. Now, Bernard, you were in Ghana. You were on the ground. How much of a contentious issue was this E-Levy in the psyche of voters? Did they talk about it? Was it one of the campaign issues? Tell us what you know.
Well, I think, Benga, it was largely one of the campaign issues. As a matter of fact, from the moment we landed in Kumasi, I got to Kumasi first before moving on to Accra. The first person I spoke to was the cab driver who picked us from the airport. And while I was interviewing him inside the cab as we made our way to our hotel, I asked him what the challenges were concerning the current government of President Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo. And the first thing he talked about was the E-Levy, the taxes, basically, complaining that, taxes, particularly this E-Levy, which was targeted at the informal sector, was really, really weighing down on people like him, who is just a cab driver. And now the issue with the taxes is this, that the government said that the informal sector, as I mentioned earlier, constitutes, I beg your pardon, a large part of the society in Ghana. And because of the kind of jobs that they do, there are no proper tax records being paid, or there are no proper taxes being paid by people in this particular demographic. And sadly, the government felt that these taxes would do well to help build or improve infrastructure in the country. However, the people in this demographic had complained that these taxes would further weigh down or weigh in on their financial position. Just like Afua said while she was speaking, the economy of Ghana hadn't been doing too well in the past few years, and these taxes, the people felt, will cause a huge strain on their finances and on the economy generally. The thing about the taxes is the people in government, still up until now, claim that, as I mentioned earlier, these taxes will help build infrastructure, help improve the tax net of the country, and generally improve the economy of the country. So it was like two different divides where the majority of the people complaining about the taxes, but parts of the government claiming that these taxes will do well for the economy, that it may take its toll on the people initially, but that over time they will begin to reap the fruits or reap the benefits of these particular taxes. Well, guess what? It's been 2 years, going to 3 years since then. I was in Ghana just last month, and the people didn't seem to have felt, any impact of these taxes. If anything, they just continue to complain. And if you ask me, I think this is one of the reasons why the ruling party may have lost the election. President-elect John Dramani Mahama has said that some of these taxes he will take away when eventually he gets sworn in as president. And I strongly believe that the people of Ghana are waiting and watching and listening to see if he will make do these promises, particularly the removal of this E-Levy tax. And if you remember again, Benga, in 2022, I think sometime in February, just around the time that the tax was going to be implemented, there was a protest in Ghana, as a matter of fact, if not two protests, if I'm not mistaken, in the past 2 years. News Central was on the ground there in Accra, and we did cover part of the protest where majority of the participants of that protest were youths, and they largely complained about this E-Levy tax. So yes, coming back to your question, a lot of voters who we spoke to, or who I spoke to in Kumasi, largely complained about the taxes, and their hope was that the incoming president, John Mahama, would do something concerning the taxes, possibly completely take out this E-Levy taxes as it is right now.
Afua, what did you notice any suggestions towards a review of the E-Levy by the campaign of Mahama just during the elections? And is there perhaps any indication that the 9th Parliament that's set to be inaugurated might also revisit it?
Politics are when there's a handover of power. The new party or the new government has a habit of undoing a lot of what the previous government has done. And E-Levy has been a huge issue, even since its conception, since it was talked about in sort of 2020, 2021. I lived in Ghana in 2022 when the E-Levy came in. I saw the protests. I knew how upset people were about it, especially your smaller, informal traders. Your hairdressers, your barbers, people like that who wanted to deal less in cash because of fake notes, because of people underpaying them. And at that time, about 40% of people in the country had mobile money. Those numbers have increased. And that's why the tax on E-Levy was so damaging, because if I'm sending you something, I now have to send more money. Everything is costing more. And people were told, like Bernard so rightly said, people were told that, look, this tax is going to go towards infrastructure at schools, roads. Well, at that time, schools were free, right? Remember, the jewel of Nana Akufo-Addo's presidency was free education for all. So the tax was going towards roads, right? My own personal experience, when my house is in Ghana, that road has not been done since before 2022. But I'm paying E-Levy, and you told me that road will be fixed, the Accra to Kumasi road. Bernard, I'm not sure if you took it when you were in Ghana. I did the time before last I was there. That road has been under construction for 4 years. What should be a 3.5-hour journey takes 7 hours. But I'm paying E-Levy, and the infrastructure has not been repaired. It hasn't been done. And so I think we can expect Mahama to review E-Levy. I don't think it will go away completely, though. It perhaps will be less, but I think he will need to have some sort of taxes in place. And E-Levy is an easy win. Bearing in mind that in Ghana, we're still paying a COVID-19 levy, COVID-19 tax when you eat out, when you go to bars, when you go to clubs, things like that. Even when you go to the cinema, to restaurants, you pay a COVID-19 tax. pretty sure the pandemic was 5 years ago now. And so some of those taxes are going to have to go. So E-Levy is going to have to stay. And so just after E-Levy came in, you had a huge reduction in people using it. People sending transfer errors below 100 cedis, it was reduced by 19%. People doing transactions between 100 and 200 cedis was down by 28%. Transactions above 200 cedis was down by 48%. But those figures have slowly increased. It's definitely not back to where it was before the E-Levy came in, but lots of people are more used to the idea. And when I was on the ground in Accra just before the election, along with Barnard, you know, talking to people about the issues leading up to the election, E-Levy was a big one. But it was also the issue of, I'm paying the E-Levy, but where is the results? What is happening? The markets still haven't been repaired. The roads still haven't been repaired. You can't tell me it's going towards education because school is free. So what is happening to that money? That will have to be justified if E-Levy is going to stay.
Okay, staying with you, Afua, quickly before we go on a break, and then we'll bring in our other panelists into the discussion. I know, election season is over, politicians promise, and you just highlighted that there's a trust deficit between the people and the government, saying, you know, they take all this money from the E-Levy, and you've not seen the results on ground. There's still problems with infrastructure. Quickly, before we go on a break, I remember one of the most viral moments, it went global, of the 8th Assembly in Ghana was the Member of Parliament, I believe is an MDC member, Isaac Adongo, when he made the comparison with the outgoing Vice President, who happened to be the head of the economic management team, Mr. Bawumia, comparing him to Manchester United defender Harry Maguire, who was going through a very bad patch at that moment, and people laughed about it. Look, given the luxury of hindsight and looking forward, do you think now that the government, it's easy to play opposition, it's easy to point fingers, looking at the economic standing of Ghana at the moment, and also the politics they played with the E-Levy, do you think the new government, the incoming government, will be able to plug all those gaps, fix the infrastructure, and fulfill a lot of their campaign promises now that they have a majority in Parliament?
With all due respect, it looks as though Dr. Bawumia is still having his Harry Maguire moment because of that loss that he has suffered only a few weeks ago. And you say trust deficit. I say worries about corruption. Look, we all know that Mahama was in power from 2012 to 2017. He was a one-term president. And that presidency was mired by allegations of corruption, but also by the energy problems which resulted in Doomsor, which was rolling power cuts across the country all the time, every week, all day long. You know, that's what his presidency was mired by. And so going into this new presidency, Mahama has the challenge of trying to make sure that his government is more trustworthy than the one he had in 2012 to 2017, but also the government that's come after that, you know, the years after that as well. He now has to set the standard for the anti-corruption government. And we know that he's going to have, you know, anti-corruption laws in place, committees in place. It was one of the first things he did was to appoint this committee of 9 members to investigate corruption. Whether people will actually trust that committee to do that remains to be seen. And when it comes to finances, when it comes to the economy, also at the moment, Ghana, yes, is in a better place than it was in February 2022, when inflation was at 52%. Now, inflation is not that high at the moment, and prices are coming down, but people are still really feeling the pinch. And like I said, the way the cedi is pegged against the dollar and the pound, you know, people are getting much less for their money. And so he really has a lot of work to do to make sure that the economy can remain strong and keep getting stronger, that corruption remains to be something that he's working on, that his government remain transparent when it comes to that. And so he himself, John Mahama, especially the first 100 days of his presidency, he doesn't need any Harry Maguire moments, let me tell you.
All right, Afua, thank you very much for, giving us some of these analysis and putting things in perspective as regards, you've talked about two things today, the LGBTQ and bill and the
E-Levy tax.
E-Levy tax. Thank you very much. Well, I want a very short break, and when we come back, we'll be taking on the 10% betting tax. That's another controversial thing that the 8th Assembly did. We have a guest that will be introducing after the break, and of course we're going to look progressively towards the 9th Assembly before the inauguration in another hour. Stay with us. Thank you for staying with us. This is our live coverage of preparations ahead of the inauguration of the 9th Parliament, Ghanaian Parliament. We know that come the 7th, it's already the 7th here in Nigeria, but we'll have 1 hour ahead for Ghana. They will be inaugurating President-elect, former President Muhammad. But before we take that, those are live pictures actually. Let's see if we can blow them out. We have live pictures from the Parliament. I'll just let you know that the 8th Parliament was dissolved earlier on the 6th, that's hours ago at 7 a.m. and it marked the end of the 8th Parliament, making way for the 9th Parliament. It's been particularly notable for its unique balance of power. It was a hung Parliament actually, and there was a lot of talk about some of the debates and the the fighting that took place for bills to become law. We know what happened with the E-Levy when there were conversations about how it's going to become law.
And it makes for interesting democracy. Ghana is a model, like I said earlier, of stable democracy in West Africa and indeed Africa. So many people proud and always ready to use the Ghanaian example positively when it comes to stability and democratic practices in Ghana. We're looking forward to the 9th Parliament, which will be different because the incoming government of John Mahama, MDC's John Mahama, wouldn't have to deal with tight negotiations.
Yes, there is no hung parliament this time. And then though the quotient of women that are going to be in the 9th Assembly is just slightly lower than what we have at the 8th Assembly, it's still
but to make
good
up
thing.
For that, the incoming vice president is a woman.
It's not making up. We still want more women in positions of authority, but it's a shift actually from a party dynamics. We also have new entrants to the Parliament for the 9th Assembly. We have new people who haven't been in Parliament before, so fresh ideas, fresh mind. Some people say this is something exciting for Ghanaians to look forward to.
And, Ghanaians won't give the easy, even though they had almost a landslide victory, a smooth ride to Jubilee House, they won't give them an easy pass in the sense that they've seen how much the outgoing administration promised and little they delivered. So there will be a lot of pressure on these gentlemen and women that we can see on our screen to push legislation towards the betterment of the Ghanaian people, which are high. Yeah. So we can see live pictures from Accra in Ghana. The members of the Parliament are just waiting to be sworn in for the 9th Assembly in Ghana.
Okay, we can also tell you that based on results from 275 constituencies, pending recollation from 2 areas, the National Democratic Congress, the NDC, currently holds for the 9th Assembly 183 seats, representing 66.3%, and that makes them the majority caucus. The New Patriotic Party, the NPP, follows with 88 seats. That's 31.88%. And interestingly, we have the independent candidates. I mean, that's actually the first time I'm seeing such representation. It seems like a little to a lot of persons, 4 people as independent candidate, but it is a lot. It is a movement. As slow as it might seem, it's a movement. And we know that in the 8th Assembly, that independent candidate played a key role in swaying votes for bills. So this time around, let's see what happens with the 9th
and
Parliament
how effective
and the 4
they might
people.
be. They're likely going to sway towards the ruling government or the opposition. You can't really be independent in the sense of it in the assembly, because you have to vote for for bills to be passed, only if you want to abstain from bills. So either way, we would see the direction in which this independence.
I also read earlier today that there was some concerns about the 8th Parliament and the idea that they could not check the executive's excesses as much as they should. That seems to be an opinion that's held by people who have been in Parliament prior to this 8th Assembly. Let me see if I can actually find where I put that together.
One of the other things to look out for is the Speaker of the 9th Assembly, because there are talks and instructions from the executive. But we talk about separation of powers all the time, that the executive should not intervene in the legislative business. But we'll get to that. I guess I'll just direct that question.
The name
to
I was trying to remember was the former minority leader, Haruna Idrisu. In an interview, he criticized the 8th Parliament for its perceived failure to effectively curb excessive government borrowing. But we have more analysis for you, but not from us this time. We have an African affairs analyst, Bakarr. He joins us now to give some perspective on the conversations, expectations for the 9th Assembly. Thank you for joining us tonight as we celebrate the Ghanaian democracy. Talk to us about your perception of the 8th Assembly and perhaps some areas that you think they could have done better, and what you think the 9th Assembly might do to make improvements.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I agree, and I actually join you in recognizing that it is a moment to celebrate in the region. I think, as many of us know, I mean, this kind of political stability in the region is not very, very common. So I think that's something to celebrate. I think as we think about, the 8th and the 9th Parliament, I know it's very easy to get lost in the details, the little actions and the big actions. But I think it's important to understand it in terms of the continuum. And I don't necessarily mean that, the bad things to continue and so forth. But what I mean is that you can think of, Ghana as in a trajectory of political maturity, within a democratic context. And each parliament, of course, will come with its own challenges. But I think the broader picture here is really what this new parliament can learn from the old parliament and how they can improve in terms of their processes, in terms of the democratic culture, in terms of the culture of engagement, and of course, abiding by the rule of law. So I think that's the general picture there. Now, in terms of specifics, I guess achievements or shortcomings of the previous parliament, certainly, of course, I mean, there was, of course, a lack of democratic maturity in Ghana. And so I think you see that reflected in the parliament, especially when you do have, kind of like a hung, legislature, so, but I think, again, we can all read about the specific disagreements, fights, and, legislations passed or not passed. But I think the broader picture here, it really is, inculcating that culture of civility in public discourse, understanding that parliament is a public discourse, and understanding that the business of parliament is to represent people, but also is for people to be leaders and to make judgment based both on principles, but also representation of the people. So I think those are really my general high-level kind of comments.
Now, Professor Bakarr, look, I'm sure you've been seeing live feed videos of Parliament in Ghana, buzzing with parliamentarians getting ready to be sworn in for the 9th Assembly. Could you take us through what is happening tonight and how much of a tradition is this? And also, a lot of our viewers will be wondering, why is this happening? Why is it happening at the stroke of midnight? Shouldn't these people be in bed as parliamentarians? In other countries across the world, we see that, I mean, if the business of the day starts in the morning. Could you take us through some of this history and give us some context to what we're seeing on our screen?
Right. So, you know, I mean, the mandates of legislatures, again, speaking in the context of a democratic context, I mean, those are laid in constitutions. And typically it specifies the time when the mandate of in the previous entity ends and when the new one ends. So in that sense, I mean, it is simply a matter of following the law in terms of where that transition happens. And of course, I mean, you know, as you know, the core elements really is the election and the certification of those results by the governing body. But also within that, I mean, you do have you know, the moments of taking oaths, celebrations, you know, having this, if you wish, public show of democracy and having people, you know, live that moment. So I think most of what we're seeing here is, in a sense, is a symbolic manifestation of actually what the law has already done and codified. And I think it's important, again, it is not, so two things really here. One is, we should not really equate this in a celebrations, pageantries and so forth with what the law is. But also number two, we should not really underestimate them because their symbolic and, you know, manifestation to the people is very important. This is really what most people will see. Most people are not really adept in the law or understand the law in that details. So I think this really matters a lot. And again, it's a form of celebration. Of course, I mean, it's a moment for celebration after victories. But from here on, the work goes on. I think really the takeaway point really here is that at this moment, having a particular time when people actually symbolically, you know, hand over power, so to speak, through, you know, swearing ceremonies, you know, huggings and laughing and so forth, going through a procedure. I think that is really very, very important, especially for a country like Ghana and, you know, many other countries in the region where still people do not really understand the idea of power as being something temporary. When people don't understand power as something that you are entrusted with, and you have to hand it back. So I think this is not just something that for Ghanaians to look, but actually for everybody in the region, but also even beyond in other places in the world where we do have these kinds of issues.
Yeah, the Night Assembly has something extra unique, and that's the 120 debutant MPs. Fresh, you know. How will these people influence, or there are talks that they will influence debate and shift the dynamics? In what ways do you think this will happen, and how would Ghanaians respond?
I think a couple of things about the new parliament, of course, especially in contrast to the previous parliament. This is one in which, you know, the ruling party will have a, you know, a supermajority, like a real majority of seats, in contrast to the previous one. So we will have a situation of one party dominance in a sense. And I think, you know, it's a mixed baggage, it's a mixed blessings. If used properly, of course, it will, you know, make the procedures of you know, doing the people's business much more easier. It will also mean, I guess, a much more unified agenda. But on the flip side, if it is actually if it is abused, then of course you will have, you know, a one-sided kind of like you know, application of power, especially when you may have issues of regional disparities and also, of course, other kinds of divides. So I think about this parliament here, the first is to just understand the weight of that majority which they have, which is pretty significant, meaning that they can do most things by themselves without the opposition. So I think that's a very important responsibility, and I hope they use that mandate. They don't misunderstand that mandate. It doesn't really mean that because people voted for you with a huge majority now, it doesn't necessarily mean that they will actually entrust you for 4 years with that. So I think they have to, hopefully they will moderate that. Now, in terms of the composition of the members of the new parliament, again, I don't really know, the specific backgrounds of most of the people, so I cannot really speak to, I guess, their biographies or how many of them are new or not. But I think it is important to note that, there is a growing trend towards the involvement of the youths and younger people and marginalized people in politics. So to the extent that, again, many of these people may not come from a purely political background, or at least, come from a much wider, backgrounds in terms of walks of life, I think that can really lend opportunities because, again, remember this, democracy is about representation. And to represent the people means really that you have to understand their background. And I think the more you actually share with them, I mean, both from a cultural standpoint, linguistic background, religious background, class background, I mean, the more you share with them, the more you can relate and understand them, and the better you can represent them. So I hope, that, the incoming parliament, or the members of the incoming parliament do have this diversity of backgrounds to be able to really represent the people of Ghana in a much more holistic and I guess a meaningful way.
Thank you very much, Professor Bakarr. Now, just moving away from the swearing of the parliament and looking at democracy in Ghana holistically. I mean, Ghana is in the troubled West Africa region that has witnessed a number of coups in the last few years. Mali, Burkina Faso, Guinea, and Ghana didn't always used to be such a model democracy. Could you talk to us, Prof, about what makes Ghanaian democracy thick, and why have we consistently seen peaceful change of democratic governments to the other? What did Ghana do, and what lessons can the rest of Africa learn from the Ghanaian example?
Right. Yeah, and this is actually something very important. Again, Ghanaian democracy is not a done deal. It's a work in progress, but it is a significant step that they have. They think they have gone a long way. I mean, you have had repeated change of governments through peaceful elections, so that is something very, very important. Let me just really flag out some few points here because I think it's important. When you talk about democracies and governance and so forth, to understand some few things. So the first and foremost thing really is about the rule of law, and I think that is a very important. And that is devoid of, the material, things that governments or democracy may bring, good economies, jobs, and so forth and so forth. I think the first and foremost, just the understanding that power is actually, in a sense, rests on a system of rules. And that rule of law has actually been, followed. Granted, of course, I mean, there are hiccups here and there, but just understanding the rules-based nature of power and governance, I think, to me, I mean, that is the biggest really achievement here. Certainly, I mean, I think each new election that happens in Ghana and each change of government that happens reinforces that is to say, power is actually based on rules, and those rules are actually emanate from the people, and people have to respect that. And I think once you get that, going on, I think it helps stability. It's one thing to know that actually, you are not happy with your situation, and there's a way for you to change the government. That is quite different from when you are not happy with your situation, and you really don't have a clear path to changing the government. So again, all praises here to Ghana. Now, to the more, everyday kind of things, when we talk of democracy, people want democracy for a lot of reasons. Certainly, I mean, first and foremost, it is because it's a rules-based system. It's supposed to be based on universal principles of equality, freedom, and so forth. But also people tend to assume or think that a democratic government will deliver some of the essences of life. I mean, economies, jobs, education, and so forth and so forth. And I think we should not be surprised to be disappointed that democratic governments may not be able to deliver those things in the way we think. And I think, there's a lot of shortcomings in Ghana from an economic and social standpoint. But again, that should not really minimize the other aspect of the achievements in Ghana. So I think, speaking to the region, I think the difference really here is that Ghana has a template. Ghana has a formula. Ghana has a path for stability. And all economic development and whatnot rest on stability. And again, I really don't just mean stability based on some kind of dictatorship. I mean stability based on a system of rules that progressively move towards more inclusivity, more freedom for the people. So I think that's really the most important point here. That is,
and when you talk about stability, I'm sure some countries in West Africa, like Nigeria, for instance, a lot of citizens will agree with you. Stability is where every other thing rests. Economic development and growth of any community. Stay with us. Let us also bring in Abraham Great. He's a public affairs analyst. Abraham, thank you for joining us for this conversation.
Thank you very much for having me, and good job to the current speaker as well.
Yes. Okay. I'm not sure if you've been following us, but before now we reviewed some of the actions of the 8th Assembly, from the E-Levy to the LGBTQ bill and to the betting tax. Which one stood out for you the most, and you think that Parliament gets credit for, and perhaps what this 9th Assembly can pick from them?
First of all, I want to congratulate the people of Ghana for the transition, upholding the Article 112 and 113 of the 1992 Constitution. Ghana has served, particularly in West Africa, as the big brother of democracy, if you like. In every way, Ghana senior Nigeria in democracy, both in terms of the time, the time lapse between our two independence, and even the experience of coup and everything that we've gone through, having permanent electricity during the Jerry Rawlings and all that. Now, in terms of the 8th Assembly, I see, because of the fact that it was a hung parliament, there were some challenges in the fact that you see more power tussle. Particularly, you could feel that in the country, the current president, the outgoing president rather, seems to have some hold on regions of the country, and also had an hold. As you know, government had to intervene for you to be able to have a tie break, but there seems to be a dictatorship into that parliament, however even the parliament was. So you look at things like the LGBT bill, for example. I think I applaud the parliament in the fact that, that bill has been lingering for a while. And the uniqueness of Ghana is the fact that also Ghana is probably the most traditionally political country, if it may, in Africa, in the whole of Africa, maybe second, or South Africa might be second to that. What I mean in that the tradition of Ghana, spirituality and traditionality, is entrenched into parliament. The attitude of the legislature is actually a reflection of how Ghana viewed themselves traditionally. So who are the people pushing for these? These are very, very strong people. Spiritual leaders, traditional leaders are pushing for the LGBT bill. But however, they have managed to hang in there and kept it there. I just don't understand how it's not been passed, into law. Well, it's been passed into law. I believe that the government couldn't assent into it, and that's one of the challenge for the new government. I think every government is trying to avoid, to go that deep. But I think, knowing the person of John Mahama, I think it wouldn't be a problem for him to be able to assent that bill that the previous parliament had worked hardly on. But then if I can touch on the, I think it's the electronic levy as well. One of the things you have to understand about Ghana is that Ghana is not very, very financially resourced country. And it always have to think outside the box to be able to raise funds. For example, you see the monetary, I think it's $3 billion loan that the outgoing president took from IMF. You know, you can see that they need funds. And one of the ways that you can inject cash into an administration is through taxation. We can understand that, you know, the Eighth Assembly fought very hard, you know, because people are suffering, just like Nigerians are saying recently. Ghana have been saying for the last few years, we are hungry, things are happening, and stuff like that. And the legislatures, the legislators have been trying their best to see if they can withhold or withdraw this levy. But I am of the opinion that the levy is a necessary evil and may not have much impact on the people. Thank you.
Now, stay with you, Great Abraham. Let's talk numbers. We're expecting 276 MPs to be inducted in the next 30 minutes. And of this 276, 120 of them, which is about 43%, are debutant MPs. I mean, there's parliamentarians that have never been there before. Having said that, how much of an effect would it have on them carrying out legislative duties since they are fresh, 43%? We also know that it's not a hung parliament. The MDC has a majority. And how much of a difference will this make in pushing legislation? Having said that, what's also your expectation for the night assembly?
I'm somewhat excited for Ghanaians in terms of, first, you realize that because Ghana practices the unitary system of governance or of government, they have less things to worry about, like Nigerians, where we have a lot of, ethnic divide. We're talking about that on a daily basis. That is entrenched into our politics. Secondly, because of the system of the unitary that they have, they don't have that selection of having done the presidential election, then they have to do governorship. No, the leaders of the 16 regions will have to be selected or handpicked by the president. And this is why this is unique, because I mean, I was in Ghana recently, and by proxy or by some relationship, I am excited about this current president because I know him, I know his people, I know the way he thinks. And what you would see, learning from his first administration, is that John Mahama has actually worked very hard on the people that are going to be in parliament. He has, in some of them, he has built personal relationships where possible. He has done a lot of leadership development around the country. So what you have is a government that I foresee to be, you may look at them as yes men. In another way, you will almost look at it as the political system or method of the current president of Nigeria, where a lot of the people that are in the legislature can find a way or two, a link that they have been influenced, by the president in a way. Either the protege, either he has helped them at some point in life, either they look at his progressive mindset and they copy his ideology. The same thing is now happening. The last time that Ghana had such a majority, an intentional government, I would think it's in 1992. So what you are having here, in fact, the majority you haven't, the last time I checked, I think it was 183, and I think it might end up being 184 with one independent member. You are having a massive selection, carefully crafted people or members of the parliament that are pro the president. How will that leave government? I think the humility of the president, the humility of this member will also help the country not to be to become volatile. Let me make this final point. You see, unlike Nigeria, where we have 250 ethnic groups, Ghana has, I think, about 4 or 5 or maximum six major ethnic groups. The ruling party, I'll call them, the incoming president are of the, I think they call them the Akan tribe. You will see that these are the northerners, where the current president are the southerners and stuff like that. Now, some of the potential deficiency of the 9th parliament would be in balancing what the tradition, and I say tradition, and the traditional norms, traditional expectations of the South in continuity rather than in perpetuity as to what the North always want. I rejoice with them ahead because Ghana is not that heavy on ethnicity, but they are very heavy on traditions.
All right, let's bring back Bakarr. I mean, you've heard a lot of what Abraham Great has submitted. How much of relevance should we be putting on, religion and ethnic leanings for the 9th Parliament? What should be their priority outside of consideration of, leanings?
So the issues of divides, especially ethnic divides, which are very common across Africa, it's actually a very, very important and complicated issue. And I think the more a country masters how to manage it, the better it will be. Most of the African countries where you find significant political problems are cases in which you do have forms of government in which ethnic and regional divides are not properly managed, and you do have clear domination of one group persistent over and over and over. So, of course, Ghana is a much smaller country. I mean, again, going back to the comparison to Nigeria, certainly, I think its ethnic divides are not as sharp as in some other places, but it is there. And I think this is where I think it's important to go back to the achievements that Ghana is actually having, and that is a political system based on rule of law. It doesn't really mean that it is perfect, but what it means that, there are pre-established rules of seeking and gaining power, and people understand those rules, and people are somehow following those rules. Now, there are, of course, a lot of manipulations in Ghanaian elections, controversies, and we have seen that over and over. So this is not really to romanticize or to, pretend as if there's no problems in Ghanaian politics. But I think it's the direction of things that matters here most, and it's a learning. So I think my simple take really here is that as Ghana moves towards this part of democracy, they should actually think of not just to reproduce what is there, but also how to continuously improve. And one way to and one area that actually needs improvement is actually how to be more inclusive ethnically and geographically. Those things will matter as the country keeps on going further. So again, I think the North-South divide is there, and the North is far much more diverse as compared to the South. But certainly, these are like some things that which Ghana has to be very, very mindful of. That is to say, you have to build an inclusive political system. It doesn't really matter how people, whether by the way people identify by ethnicity or by region or by religion. All of those things really matter.
Thank you very much, Professor Abubakar. Now, quick one, Great, back to you, Great Abraham. You did have quite a lot of positive things to say about the incoming President John Dramani Mahama, who's been in office before. He's an experienced politician, and the MDC did campaign. One of their focal points for the campaign during the campaign season was Operation Recover All Loots, which points at an anti-corruption fight. You said you visited Ghana recently, and from the pulse of the people, from the people you interacted with and the mood on the ground, what should be the priority of this new incoming government, knowing that it has a parliamentary majority? He's riding on the back of a very popular mandate. What should they prioritize, and what are the yearnings and aspirations of ordinary Ghanaians?
I think, first of all, the incoming president, John Mahama, is quite courageous to make a focal point of his administration, the corruption, because of the fact that one of the reasons why he lost the election in the first place was that his government was being alleged to be corrupt. Several issues, if I recall, were brought, to fore at that time, particularly the attitude of his own brother, his own biological brother, I think, in government at the time. So it signifies a few things. It signifies, number one, courage. Number two, it signifies the integrity of his heart to know that, look, you may have alleged a lot, but this is my stance on corruption. This is at the back end of seeing Ghana have gone since 2027 from 0% on the International Transparency Index. Right now, I think they're about 40-something%. They are moving up, closer to the 100 mark, meaning that they are doing better, particularly under the last government. I don't know what the indices, the yardstick for that are, because I would say the last and the outgoing government should be accused as much as the previous government that is now coming back in. Corruption is almost the same thing, not just in Africa, in every part of the world. The difference that we have, I've often seen, is that most countries, particularly like with Nigeria, we have institutionalized corruption. Whereas in countries like America, which I am now seeing in Ghana, you have constitutionalized corruption. Because Ghana is so, like my co-panelists have said, Ghana is doing its best to follow the rule of law. I hope you can still hear me.
We can still hear you, but I think we lost your visual. While we try and sort that out, we still have a little time, quite limited, but we'll make do. We want to get our guests' perspective on this before we jump on and welcome the Night Assembly. And a little work was done here to put this together. I'm talking about the 10% tax on earnings from betting activities, which was implemented by the Ghanaian government effective January 1st, 2023. The move was set to regulate the rapidly growing betting industry and generate additional revenue for the state. My colleague Ibelani Omoni takes a look at the impact of this development as Ghanaians look forward to the president's promise of reversing the tax bill. Let's take that and we'll come back.
The industry in Ghana has experienced a significant boom in recent years, with an estimated annual turnover of over $200 million. Arguably, the reason the government implemented a 10% tax on earnings from betting activities effective 2023. The tax is expected to generate substantial revenue for the government, which plans to invest a portion of the funds into youth development programs and initiatives to combat gambling addiction.
We need the revenue, we need the taxes to develop the country.
The decision over the years sparked mixed reactions from stakeholders and the general public. While some applaud the government's effort to regulate the industry and generate revenue, others argue that the tax may drive bettors to seek illegal or offshore platforms, ultimately undermining the intended objectives.
Betting companies have come to make the youth also have a better way of getting money, which is in a way not good, but it's better than being an armed robber.
Tax is good, but if you tax the person, if the person who tax it is too high, he can't even pay, even he will draw.
It has no positives, it has no advantages. I'm urging them, if they think we win, they should take Ghana's reserves, go there and stake and see if the youth win. That is where they will know that they have to put money into the pockets of the youth. Every month, at least 500 cedis on my Momo, then it comes.
Youth involvement in betting has been a growing concern in Ghana, with many attributing it to factors such as unemployment, lack of recreational activities, and the allure of quick financial gains. According to a recent survey, approximately 25% of Ghanaians between the ages of 18 and 35 engage in some form of betting, with a significant portion doing so regularly. During a town hall meeting with the youth before the election, the President-elect John Mahama has promised to reverse the decision.
This one be the yawa of the day. You see, boys they hustle, and job no day. So now the bet, they do small, get money for gobe. You see? So I understand, as no say this one, it be matter where they concern the youth, plenty. So we talk already, say where we come, the betting tax will go remove them.
It remains to be seen if the president will keep to his promise. In the meantime, the industry continues to evolve and the government faces the challenge of striking a balance between generating revenue, protecting vulnerable populations, and ensuring a fair and transparent regulatory framework for betting activities in Ghana. In Lagos 4 News Central, I am Igbalani Omoni.
You're watching this special broadcast of the dissolution of the 8th Ghanaian Parliament, and also in a few minutes the 9th Parliament will be inaugurated. We'll go on a quick break, and when we return, we'll bring you more on this discussion. Do stay with us.
In exactly 9 minutes, the 9th Parliament, Ghanaian Parliament, will be inaugurated, and officials will be elected and sworn in to key positions. Those are live pictures of, MPs and others waiting.
See how happy they are. There's a lot of work to be done. Yeah, you could see them exchanging banter.
I mean, before the work, you have to celebrate. You can't just say work all the time. You have to prepare for it, put yourself. There must be a balance.
Exactly.
You work, you rest, you enjoy, and life is good.
But I still find it interesting that they're out there at midnight Ghanaian time, and a lot of them will be at the Black Star.
Abubakar did explain that dynamic for us. We still have our guests, though, Abubakar and Abraham Great. They're still with us via Zoom. Let's see if I can just fix this question to Abraham. Just to ask you quickly, the 9th Parliament, analysts have said, will face similar challenges like the 8th Parliament had seen. What lessons do you think they can learn from the 8th Parliament that will help them in navigating the intricacies of politics and lawmaking?
Thank you. First of all, I do not agree that they are going to face similar challenge to the 8th Assembly because Ghana don't seem to have a lot of policy issues on the table. One. Secondly, some of the current major issue on the table is already half solved, half debated. Like, for example, the LGBT bill is already passed. It's just waiting for the presidential assent. You look at the the electronic levy. You mentioned also the tariff, the betting tariff. Now, there are two dimensions to that tariff that people need to understand. That, first of all, the articles of that bill is addressing the corporations that own these betting companies, lottery companies. I own a lottery company in Nigeria. For the past 2 years. What most people don't know is that a lot of those lottery companies also can be charity. Like myself and my friends, we've invested a lot of money. I don't think I've made $1 from it, but we have sponsored people to travel abroad, theglobalwin.com. We've sent a lot of children to universities in Nigeria, a lot of young people into university, do passport for people. Now, there's a levy on the corporation like ourselves. And then there is a levy on the winners. Now,
right,
here
Abraham,
is how that is.
I get your point. You don't agree that it will face similar challenges with the instances you've given. But we have less than 6 minutes, actually, to go live with events at the Parliament. So I'll just bring in Bakarr quickly to also speak on his expectation in summary for the night assembly. A lot of work is expected from them. What should they start with running off? In about a minute, if you can.
Right. So I think certainly, first and foremost, I think, so really there are two things here that I think we have to really keep in mind. One is the government, that is the executive branch, and the legislature, the assembly. Now, we're talking about the assembly here, but these are really connected. I mean, for the government, that is for the country to actually achieve, what it needs to do, you have to have, an executive that works with the assembly. Now, in this case, I mean, the incoming is going to be unitary government in the sense that you have both the executive and the majority of parliament in the hands of the same political party. So there is a lot there. I think three things I want to just emphasize for them. One is they really have to ask themselves, why did they won? And part of the reason why they really won is not really because they are good. I mean, Mahama was actually president who actually failed. Not really because of, but they won really because people were tired with the old government. In other words, they won because of the failures of the existing government. So I think they have to really see the policy areas where those people actually failed and hopefully make improvements in the economic and social issues. That's number one. Number two, I think it's very important that they understand their mandate. They should not misunderstand their mandate. They're going to come with a government that is executive, but also a parliament in which they have an absolute majority. That is a responsibility. They should not actually use that in a sense to reinforce bad habits, to reinforce power grab, to reinforce regional dominations and so forth. Rather, they should actually use that as a constructive way to see, well, how can we actually move government, move the people's agenda forward? So in a sense, just as in the previous parliament, I mean, they had a hung issue parliament when it's difficult to get things because of divides. In this case, they actually have to be responsible with power. That's the second thing. And the third thing I want to flag is that what they should keep on taking forward and moving forward and learning from is the process, is the rule of law. To understand that the country, the government operates based on a system of rules, and respecting those procedures and those rules and keep on improving in that culture. The more Ghanaians actually improve on the culture of rule of law, abiding by what the law is and improving the law towards greater inclusivity and also, of course, greater freedom, the better the country will be. And, next time they will win again. A win really is not to win election. A win is to actually improve the people's life. A win is to actually have a country that is stable. A win is to actually have a country in which people want to live in the country. So really, it's not about whether you get elected or not. That's just, what we think. But in the long run, in the history, in the books of history, what will matter is really how much they improve the people's life and the stability of the country.
Professor, thank you very much for your contributions thus far. Just hold on. We're not saying our goodbyes yet, but would like to just remind our viewers, if you're just tuning in, the live pictures that will be coming on your screen as I speak is from the preparations. In just 2 minutes, the night assembly will be inaugurated. Based on results that we have from 275 constituencies, pending recollation from Ablekuma North, the National Democratic Congress, NDC, holds 183 seats, and that represents 66.3%, making it the majority caucus in parliament that's about to be inaugurated. The MPP follows with 88 seats, that's 31.88%. And then we have 4 independent candidates. And we've not had the opportunity to actually talk to a guest about exploring what the dynamics that those 4 candidates will bring. This majority, analysts say, is historically significant, representing the second largest majority since Ghana's 4th republic began in 1993. The largest was recorded in the first parliament, where the NDC controlled 189 seats. Independent MPs have also increased, a notable shift from the 7th and 8th parliament, where only 0 and 1 independent seats were recorded respectively. We also talked about the debutant MPs. We have 120 of them, quite a number, representing 43% of the House. That means in every 10 MPs, we have 4 newcomers. That's what
Very interesting dynamics and statistics there, Felicity.
It's just amazing what we're seeing. You can see everybody's ready. This is actually 12 a.m. and that's the time that Ghana does its inauguration for its parliament, and pictures you see now are live. But before we go over to events at the parliament, let's quickly thank our guests. Abubakar, Professor Abubakar, he's an African affairs analyst, and he's been talking with us for the past hour. We also had Abraham. We have him still. We're looking at him. Abraham from Great, our public affairs analyst as well. Gentlemen, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you tonight.
And as they say in Ghana, I would like to say Medasi, and thank you for being part of this broadcast. We wish you, and of course, the good people of Ghana, a fantastic continuation of the democratic experience. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And like the Ghanaians will say, Medamiase.
Medamiase. I hope I said that well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. We're going to go back to the parliament and bring you live pictures and just follow the events as they unfold. News Central will continue this coverage, and you will just stay with us. We'll sign off here now and bring you, continue to bring you the events at the parliament, the night parliament. And a quick reminder that the inauguration will be in a couple of hours later today of the president-elect, John Mahama. He was a one-time president, as Benga has earlier explained, and he is now coming in. And then we have the first vice president that is female for Ghana, quite a historic accomplishment as well. So stay with News Central. We'll be bringing you all the details as they unfold. I'm Felicity Eziwike.
And I'm Benga Borowa. Thank you for being a part of this broadcast.